Good morning, everyone. My name is Mārtiņš Vargulis. I'm researcher at Latvian Institute of International Affairs. And I'm delighted to be a moderator of this public discussion, as well as the presentation of the publication, 3Cs Initiative, Mapping National Perspectives. When Riga was nominated as the next host city of the summit on the 3Cs initiative, there were several discussions among stakeholders, including the Chancellery of the President's Bureau, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as well as local think tanks, including Latvian Institute of International Affairs, on how to promote the issue of the 3Cs initiative, how to raise awareness of the initiative. And as the result of one of those internal discussions between Latvian Institute of International Affairs, as well as Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we came to the conclusion that it would be very interesting to understand each national perspective of the 12 represented countries in the initiative, fully acknowledging that there are similarities, common perspectives, common vision on how to further proceed with the initiative. We realize that there is differences. And what this publication has clearly illustrated, differences exist. But having those differences, there are also some common challenges and also opportunities that each of the chapter describes. And I think that we have been successful in, I would say, quite a limited time frame to map those national perspectives. And to do that, we had really great and distinguished authors who contributed to this publication. And I'm delighted to have some of them represented here today that will discuss their chapter, will provide their perspective on the country that they presented also in the publication. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce the panelists. I remind you that each of you will have up to 7 minutes for introductory remarks, and then we will open e-floor for the questions and comments from the e-audience, online audience. And for those who are joining us online, please use the QR code that you will see up in the screen to raise the questions or comments that you have. So first, as the host nation, also representing Latvia, so Imants Lieģis, Associate Fellow, former Minister of Defense of Latvia. Imants, great to have you here.
Thank you, Martin. Yeah.
I will introduce all of them, and then we'll ask
Sure.
for you to start to kick off the discussion. Velina Tchakarova, Director of Austrian Institute for European and Security Policy. Velina, glad that you made it here.
Thank you for the invitation. Great pleasure being here.
Kamil Jorenchuk, Managing Editor of Visegrad Insight from Poland. Kamil.
Yeah, thank you.
Mihai Sebe, Head of European Studies Unit at European Institute of Romania.
Thank you.
And last but not least, definitely vision perspective from the outside, if I may say so, Anthony B. Kim, Research Fellow in Economic Freedom, Editor of the Index of Economic Freedom, and Manager of Global Engagement for the Margaret Thatcher Center for Freedom.
Thank you, Mark. It's great to be here.
Thank you, thank you. So, Imants, without any further ado, I would like to welcome you and to kick off discussion on why it's important for Latvia to host 3Cs initiative and what's Latvian interests, ideas, also challenges when it comes to the format.
Thanks very much, Martin. So it's a pleasure for me to be participating. And yes, so I would start by saying that one of the earlier challenges when the 3Cs initiative was launched, was actually motivation from the side of Latvia, because as I mentioned in the book, Latvia, it seemed to me, in the first couple of years, didn't feel that it had a dog in the fight. You know, they were the first summit that was held in Croatia. There was a very low level of attendance, even though this was a presidential summit. And so it took a bit of time for Latvia to realize that there are opportunities in the Three Seas initiative. And I suppose that hosting the summit these days with a business forum, and a month or so ago we also had a civil society meeting. We've had a parliamentary initiative that's also joined the Three Seas initiative, which is also a novel, a new aspect of the summit. So Latvia's interests are really culminating in the summit and the events surrounding the summit these days. And I suppose what's important about this summit is it's the first post-COVID in-person summit. So, but it would have been better, of course, if there had been no war taking place, if Russia had not started a full-scale war against Ukraine on the 24th of February this year, because that has changed the agenda. That's impacted the agenda of the summit, as it has with all meetings of international organizations on a global level, I suppose. And what's interesting is that out of 12 of the Three Seas initiative countries, 7 of them are either bordering Russia or Ukraine. So clearly the Ukraine element is important. Latvia, I think, my sense was when I was looking into Latvia's interests was that the major interest is geopolitical. And in that respect, one of the important elements, and this runs through generally Latvian foreign policy, is to engage the United States, to have a US presence in the region. And this, obviously, the initiative is seen as one of the strands of improving that presence of the United States. And so, interestingly, the question of the US attendance at the summit itself was regarded as one of the first priorities, and I quote, high-level US participation. You know, a few months ago, this was the main priority for the summit, and I would say that regrettably, you know, this has not been achieved because we see that there is neither a presence of President Biden. My discussions indicated that they were hoping to get Vice President Harris, but at least a state secretary. But none of those, that level has not been achieved. So I think there must be a certain amount of disappointment in Latvia in trying to achieve this aim. The other geopolitical element of the summit that and the Three Seas initiative that I want to touch on is the fact that it has been mentioned here and there that this initiative is within the European Union, because we are talking about 12 member states of the European Union, should be used as a counterbalance to the German-French motor. Now, it's interesting, I thought that this was perhaps something that was just being mooted in academic circles, but I was in a conference in Berlin last week, and one of the German participants of the conference was actually very critical of the Three Seas initiative by saying that, look, is this what Poland really wants to achieve? Because I think Poland was the driving force of this concept of having a balance against, or balancing off the French-German motor. So I think that Latvia needs to be very cautious about this aspect of the Three Seas initiative and try to play down any counterbalancing acts, especially at a time when we've got the Russian war against Ukraine, and it's very important to have EU unity and NATO unity, where Germany and France are both the lead European nations with whom we can't afford to have any forms of disagreement. And so if we're still looking at the geopolitical aspects of the Three Seas Initiative, the final geopolitical element that I want to touch on is, of course, Ukraine. Ukraine is being brought into certain projects of the Three Seas Initiative through the trust fund of the Three Seas, the investment fund of the Three Seas Initiative. There was hope that President Zelensky could attend, but obviously he's going to be making an online video appearance address to the Three Seas Summit these days. It's, of course, from the Ukrainian perspective, the good news is that last week the European Union Commission, that will also be represented here at the summit, did suggest or propose candidate status for Ukraine in the European Union. We had the visit of President Macron, Chancellor Scholz, Prime Minister Draghi, and the Romanian President to Kiev last week. Interestingly, the Polish President was not invited to join this high-level meeting and visit of leaders from Europe in Kiev. So this question of giving some, also through the Three Seas Initiative, some perspective to Ukraine is important. It's something that was mentioned by the Latvian President, President Lieģis, in his introduction to this book, where he mentions Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia being given perspective. In my article in the book, I said that perhaps some sort of special status could be offered to Ukraine in view of their situation. So in closing, I don't know how many minutes I've used up, but in closing, I would say that the Three Seas Initiative Summit in Riga with the Business Forum is creating ripples, but not waves. Thank you.
Great concluding. Imants, if I may, you in your article, and you here also described or discussed this level of participation from the US perspective, but also from Latvian. You started that from the beginning, when the initiative was launched in 2016 in Latvia, there was participation on the bureaucratic level, if I may say so.
Yes.
Now it's bringing up to the president, because we are hosting also because of that we are hosting the summit. From your perspective now, where Three Seas Initiative stands in Latvia, is it one of the main priorities? And how Latvian political leaders perceives initiative? What are the main opportunities that would?
Well, I think as you know, the phrase about the Three Seas Initiative is that it's politically inspired and economically motivated. And so I think President Lieģis of Latvia has appreciated the opportunity, because it's his presidency, and I think it was a top-down decision coming from the president's lead to get engaged with the Three Seas Initiative and to organize the events these days. And I think the opportunities clearly come from the connectivity issues, you know, the economic, the investment fund, where Latvia has committed 20 million euro to the fund. But if we look at what the man in the street of Riga is wondering, well, what do we get from this 20 million investment? Because at the moment, none of the 9 projects that Latvia has submitted to the investment fund, and they're all very important projects dealing with Rail Baltica, dealing with energy issues, wind parks, and an LNG terminal. But at the moment, there's nothing that has been specifically agreed from the fund about this. So I think that Latvia still has many challenges, and the opportunities are still there to be taken.
Thank you, Imants. Speaking of specific gains from projects, I think that it's good lead to Austria. That is that Velina in her chapter describes economic interest dominates, right? When it comes to national perspective, why Austria is part of the initiative. Velina, the floor is yours. What is Austria's perception? And I think that there is differences between Austria and other countries presented here and also in the initiative.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you very much for the invitation. And now going from geopolitics first, we are moving to Austria's place in this initiative, where actually geopolitics comes last. And I will explain exactly why it was so. Of course, a lot of things have changed when we started writing on these contributions, and this is also something that I will reflect in this very short input. Now, first thing is that Austria, of course, sees itself as occupying a kind of a unique place within the initiative. First and foremost, because of its historical and geographic position. Why? Because Austria hasn't been part of the Warsaw Bloc, so it does not carry this, baggage from the Soviet past, where other member states are still, of course, quite coherent in their views, let's say, when it comes to the threat coming from Russia. Second, of course, is also because Austria hasn't been part of Yugoslavia, but has shared a lot of historical past with some of the post-Yugoslavian countries. And of course, third most important point is that Austria, of course, because of its central positioning at the heart of Europe, sees itself in this unique situation of a bridge builder between the West and the East. Now, of course, the Alpine Republic has benefited a lot over the last decades, specifically when it comes to many of the areas covered by the Three Seas Initiative. And to be honest with you, when it comes to energy diversification, of course, one of the main topics of this initiative, there was no need for diversification prior to the war launched by Russia against Ukraine. In fact, Austria was benefiting from its energy hub position in Central Europe, and also from the pipeline networks being built between the East and the West, and did not see much incentive in actually thinking of diversification options when it comes to connecting the North with the South. Now these things have changed, and one of the most important, I think, issues now from Austria's point of view, it actually comes first, is energy policy. How Austria will have to diversify its, specifically its gas supply, given the fact that still 80% of gas supply from Russia is quite of a huge, significant dependence, right? So, and it affects not only the industry, it affects households, it affects power plants, and so on and so forth. So this is going to be definitely one of the main issues now following the war launched on 24th of February, where Austria sees suddenly a unique opportunity to start diversifying. Second, of course, is that it has been perceived, of course, as a build-bridging country, but I argue that this kind of build-bridging function, it has to be reshifted. Once again, Austria now has to actually be more politically active. This hasn't been the case within the Three Seas Initiative. Austria kept rather low profile. I argue that now with new realities on the ground, in geopolitical and geoeconomic terms, Austria has to be more active, and it has to also change this perception of itself when it comes to the Three Seas countries. That means that first and foremost, it has to be more active, more proactive towards political links with all these countries. Second, it has to start looking for options beyond its, existent networks. That means Also, of course, the perception of Austria as quite sympathetic to Russia. In fact, after Hungary, Austria is probably the second European Union member within the European Union member family that is being perceived by the other members, including Three Cities Initiative countries, as quite sympathetic to Russian interests and to Russian, ties. Okay, we could argue that also has a lot to do with the fact that Vienna is still hosting a lot of multinational, so that means international organizations and also regional organizations. But on the other side, of course, I think that this participation in the Three Cities Initiative would actually allow Austria to repolish, let's put it that way, to polish its reputation also as a European Union and also European country that actually acts in the interest of the European Union family. And here, of course, one important issue I see is that why Austria hasn't been so active so far. Well, in fact, it was also concerned about the possibility or the risk of duplications. For Austria, of course, as a non-NATO member, the European Union goes first, and there was this kind of fear that, with this initiative, it may result in kind of duplication of investments or let's say initiatives that would lead to further regionalization instead of Europeanization. So once again we could actually turn the page and say, okay, why not actually promoting exactly this kind of Europeanization, being actually a very important build-bridger between the Western developed, let's say, European Union members and those in Central and Eastern Europe. Why not actually using this major geo-economic clout Austria has, of course, as the most developed country within the initiative, but also this immense diplomatic clout in Brussels and also with other relevant European Union members, and try to actually promote the importance of creating new or launching new connectivities. For instance, when it comes to the new, very ambitious European Union policies, take Global Gateway into consideration, take Repower European Union into consideration. So we will need also kind of ambassadors that will also once translate these initiatives in the national capitals, because once again, as my colleague outlined, we should avoid also cleavages. Right now, in this kind of polarization period, in this kind of bifurcation, as I call it, of the international relations, cleavages also within the European Union members are going to, unfortunately, further emerge and be also instrumentalized by external actors. So in a sense, here I see a very important role of Austria. On the one side, to reach out to the other Three Cities Initiative members and also explain how important it is actually to use the tools, the instruments of the European Union. Mostly, the Three Cities Initiative is actually benefiting and capitalizing on the existent European Union instruments. These are still, of course, mostly money coming from all these platforms and initiatives. Second, of course, to also probably sell the story to the other European Union members. Here, of course, the German, French engine, as we said. I mean, all these kind of fears are probably at some, to some extent logical. The fear of an emergence of a new intermarium between the Western Europe and then Eurasia is something that is once again relevant because of these geopolitical shifts. And final point on my side, For Austria, the direct vicinity, that means Central European countries, Western Balkans, and now, of course, also Eastern Europe, with Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, these are the most important geo-economic areas. These are the areas where Austria has been heavily invested in. And I argue that this platform and the initiative, the Three Seas Initiative, is going to be one of the main in my view, actually the most geo-economic, most ambitious geo-economic initiative that will also offer new unorthodox ways of how the European Union can actually avoid isolation in the global arena. And here for Austria, as an export-oriented country, it's very important to actually keep track of it and to facilitate, promote. But as I said, let's be realistic. Austria, I don't see that Austria will, for instance, join the investment fund. Once again, for the same reasons why I actually outlined, which I outlined, in a sense, this kind of very fine navigation game between being a spoiler and being a multiplier will remain. And I really want to hope that the multiplying effects when it comes to Austria's role will increase, while the spoiler effects, specifically now following the war against Ukraine, will definitely decrease.
Well, Velina, thank you, and thank you for thought-provoking ideas that you outlined here and also in the chapter. Rightly so, as you mentioned, that Austria is one of the least countries, if not the last one, that hasn't contributed to the investment fund. My question will be, I wanted to ask you about this Austria's perspective, but now I'm thinking, how should initiative transform to be more attractive for Austria, to invest more from Austria's perspective? What should initiative provide that could contribute to more participation from Austria?
Well, here, of course, as I said, the most important point is how to actually deal with all the fundings coming from the European Union. I mean, let me remind you that hundreds of billions of euros actually were flowing into the into exact these countries, where at the same time there is often a kind of well, let's say, not necessarily negative attitude, but a kind of a disappointment attitude that not enough is being done when it comes to the European Union. And this kind of attitude is something that the Austrian, at least the Austrian stakeholders want to change, because they share the view that the European Union has, I mean, is obviously the biggest investor, but has in fact contributed a lot to the political and the economic reforms of specifically Central and Eastern European countries. And at the same time, we still are dealing with the same issues as 30 and 20 years ago. How these funds, how these instruments are really being implemented, what kind of level of corruption is there, what kind of level of institutions work is there in place. So in this kind of environment, I think the most important point from Austrian perspective would be, of course, how to use this momentum right now, given all these ambitious initiatives being launched by the European Union, how to actually implement them on the ground when it comes to the interests of the Three Seas Initiative. Instead of duplicating things, instead of trying to launch alternative things and more investment instruments, to actually first and foremost make sure that the existent ones are really being implemented, because some of the members of the Three Seas Initiative are still, tackling with issues such as how to cope with the funds. They don't even manage to actually get the full spectrum of the funds that are at disposal. I mean, the European Union funds, of course. The second important thing is here, and I see already a kind of shift in the attitude when it comes to the geopolitics. because geopolitics was not an incentive from Austrian point of view when it came to the participation in the Three Seas Initiative. I think that now, of course, with the changing geopolitical realities on the old continent, Austria realizes that with this kind of view, it may actually end up being isolated and misunderstood. So in a sense, there is a growing interest in the European Union-US relations. Now, Austria being not a NATO member, it does not have really this kind of leverage when it comes to the relations with the US as other members, but it can use also the momentum that is being built up within the initiative. And then again, of course, when it comes to the European Union-Russia relations, here once again, Austria will have to reshape its attitude to Moscow. And once again, I think it can use the initiative to also change the perception of itself when it comes to the Central European countries that are increasingly, of course, sharing a same attitude towards Russia.
Thank you. Thank you. Now to one of the founding actors of the initiative to Poland. Camille, what is current state of play from the Poland's perspective? How has it changed since 2016 when Poland was one of the initiating countries to launch this initiative?
Thanks, Martin. The Polish perspective is quite important in the Three Seas Initiative, as Poland is the largest country in the initiative and has actively made sure that Germany doesn't become a member of this initiative as well. The perspective, I'm sure, this year has changed. Beforehand, within Poland itself, the initiative has many avenues and views. The idea for it is known to be, it was proposed by Andrzej Duda, who is still president of Poland, and the ex-Croatian president. In fact, it's a shame that we don't have a Croatian on the panel, because what happened with the Three Seas Initiative in Croatia is quite interesting as well, and it's might be looking into what could happen to Poland if the political situation changes. This is the current government in Poland's initiative, really. The idea beforehand was, of course, the East-West Weimar Triangle, for example, the French getting closer to France and Germany, and that has to do with their more European outlook of the previous government. And the current government has a more Eurosceptic view, but also emphasizes the regional aspect. First, the Visegrad 4 cooperation, which was always Poland's priority and could be considered the first Central European sort of informal cooperation. And the Three Seas Initiative sort of came after that as a sort of maybe even advancement of the Visegrad 4, as we were having numerous V4 plus. In Romania, there were questions about Romania joining the Visegrad. In Slovenia previously, also talks of that. So the Three Seas Initiative could be an answer to the fact that the region has wider perspectives, and of course the V4 is quite set in its ways. The initiative itself comes also from the fact that the East-West connections have grown with the European Union through the funding as well, but the North-South connection was very much underappreciated. There are none. To go from Tallinn to even to Warsaw by train is impossible without going through Minsk, and road that connects all the eastern flank of the Three Seas Initiative also doesn't exist, the Via Carpatia. And the Three Seas Initiative in Poland, or by the Polish government, has been used as a way to get these projects that haven't gotten EU attention or regional attention, to sort of bring these projects to light, or to the region's attentions. For example, the Via Carpatia, the rail connection as well, Via Baltica is quite important for Poland as well, and the current state of the initiative is problematic, of course. There are the Polish Investment Bank, along with the Romanian Investment Bank, started the Three Seas Initiative Investment Fund, which still hasn't gotten Austria's funding, Slovakian funding, and Czech funding, state funding, which all three of those countries joining the investment fund would be a prerequisite for the US, for example, giving seed funding. And it is thought that if the US gives seed funding, then a lot of international private investments would follow afterwards. And as we just heard from our Austrian colleague, and I'm sure if we had our Czech or a particularly Slovakian colleague, we would hear as well that that's not going to happen anytime soon, unless maybe something changes. I think the Ukrainian perspective now has really revitalized this initiative, as we have the Bucharest 9, which is a military component. The Three Seas Initiative doesn't have a military component to it, but it's no secret that militaries need infrastructure to move between borders, and the lack of any substantial infrastructure between on the north-south eastern axis does make NATO planning much more difficult. So of course this could actually push the initiative forward, or at least Poland's projects forward. On the political level, within Poland itself, the Three Seas Initiative has issues being sold to the opposition, which is why I'm very happy. I think it's very good that the Latvians have done this parliamentary meeting aspect of the Three Seas Initiative as well, because within Poland, the opposition has been sort of left outside of this, as well as the civil society, which is why it's also good that President Levits has initiated the first civil society forum, of which I attended last month, and I hope that the presidents do take our recommendations into account. I'm afraid that if in Poland, if the governments were to change, as is the natural democratic process, because of the lack of any knowledge whatsoever of the initiative, or the connotation, which in Central Europe has been an issue, the connotation of this initiative with this government, as well as anti-European, perceived anti-European Union perspectives, that the initiative could just go into obscurity and just completely dissolve away. Which we already see in the new government in Slovenia. Janez Janša was quite pro Visegrad, the Visegrad for, and also did quite a bit for the Three Seas Initiative. And then when we in Visegrad Insight, the magazine I'm managing editor at, when we interviewed the current government on the Three Seas Initiative, it was clear that they viewed it as the current government's and almost anti-European Union in a way. So that is definitely one of the biggest challenges that Poland, particularly, has to fix. Yes, thanks, Martin.
Thank you, Kamil. In your chapter, in your speech right now, you are thinking about the regions, and there's the concept, if I'm not mistaken, macro region that you use in your chapter.
Yes.
And you are arguing that Three Seas Initiative could be as a macro region. And in order to do that, two words have been used: operationalize and institutionalize, right?
Yes.
What do you mean by that in practical terms? What would take to do that, to bring Three Seas Initiative to the macro region level?
Yep. Thank you, Martin. Bringing the Three Seas Initiative into a macro-regional level would tie it to the European Union officially, but also would leave all the agency to the countries themselves. The macro regions, there are currently 4, and all of our countries, of course, except for the U.S., belong to one or the other macro region, or even 2. These macro regions are quite innovative in the way that they bring all levels of society to the table to discuss projects that are of common interest. And the Three Seas Initiative, of course, has these: the connectivity, energy, and digitalization. Those three aspects, I think, are it could easily be the basis of a macro region. And then it would also be not just limited to the presidential level, which I think is one of the most limiting factors in the Three Seas Initiative, that this is just a presidential, because other than, honestly, Romania, I think all of our countries don't have a more of a ceremonial role for our presidents. So while it's nice that they're all meeting together, these are not the seats of power. And of course, in our countries, the European Union funding, as my Austrian colleague over here mentioned, is the main driver of funds. And one of the issues with funds, European funds, is the fact that it's the member states themselves that decide what happens to them. And while in Western Europe, with these larger countries, it makes sense to have such a national engagement. In our countries, Poland, of course, is by far the largest, but still half the population of Germany. And territorial-wise, most of our countries are quite small. So by having a macro region where we could discuss these EU funds on a regional level, on a national level, between our with institution in a way, with the European Union as a framework, which all of our countries are members of, we could actually, I think we can actually make much more of these projects, much more compelling arguments for these fundings, and also maybe coordinate the way that we vote or the way that we advocate for certain things in the European Commission, which the Baltic states do very well. For example, when the recent budget was being negotiated, Rail Baltica was pushed forward because of the Baltic states voting bloc. And I can see if these projects are really shared within the Three Seas Initiative, with these 12 member states advocating for something within the macro region, I wouldn't see how the Commission could say no or could limit these projects.
I think one of the common elements of most of the chapters was that the need for secretariat at the initiative, right? That could also lead or help in this regard. Coming to the one of the southern partners of the initiative, to Adriatic Sea, Romania. Mihai, what is the national perspective of Romania in this regard?
Thank you very much. First of all, when we speak about the Three Seas Initiative and Romania's perspective, we need to have in mind the fact that, at least in the last decades, Romania's foreign policy has been more oriented toward maintaining status quo. And what do I mean by that? After joining the EU and joining NATO, Romania, as many countries in the region, have found themselves at the apex of the security from the economic and military point of view. So basically all the policy initiatives have been, and all the energy has been maintained in order to maintain this high level of security and high level of economic development. From that point of view, the Three Seas Initiative has been perceived more or less as a logical development of an already strong partnership with Poland. We already have strong ties with Poland since the interwar period, and Poland has been our first and truly strategic partner in the region since more than 100 years. And from the point of view, the Three Seas has been seen, as mentioned before, as an evolution of this partnership. But we need to reflect also on the fact that in the beginning, Romania's interest in the Three Seas wasn't necessarily highly developed one. For instance, in the summit in Croatia, the representation was at the ministerial level. However, as time went by, we understood the fact that the Three Seas, in fact, can help boost our security, and the Bucharest Summit 2018 had been the witness of this increasing evolution of our interest. But what do we need to have in mind is, from early beginning, we have tried to separate the economic and the security perspective. Every official declaration not only stated that the Three Seas is only a regional civilian development tool, a tool meant to create cohesion and development in the region, while all the security aspects were relegated to the Bucharest 9 format. From the point of view, this need of clarity has been emphasized from the beginning. Recently, the main focus of Romania has been, as mentioned, the interconnectivity, the need to develop north-south transportation, and also the impact and the importance of energy security, from BRUA, for instance, and more recently, we have started having discussion back home in Bucharest on how Romania can become a regional hub from the energy point of view, especially the nuclear sector. Recently, we have been in discussion with our American partners in order to invest and create back home these small nuclear reactors. And a lot of optimistic official declarations say that Romania can, in a couple of years, become an expertise provider in the region in this question of nuclear energy and this type of nuclear reactors. From the point of view of what do we expect now from Riga, the interconnectivity is important in the context when, given the Ukrainian war, we have seen that the logistic in our region is insufficient and we need to develop more. For instance, we have the problem with grain transportation from Ukraine that is blocking the ports and affecting the global food security. And for that point of view, the Three Seas initiative can be seen and is seen as an antechamber of the EU membership of Ukraine, Republic of Moldova, and Georgia. Connecting and adding these countries and their important geopolitical position to the Three Seas can help develop the region. Also, we need to have in mind when we speak about the Three Seas the fact that mobility is important from the security point of view. Recently, all the statements have said that the rail to sea or the Via Carpathia are key to the military mobility, and also they are key to building a resilient infrastructure in the region. Thirdly, the Three Seas initiative is seen and is perceived at all the points of view as a way to increase the unity and the cohesion in the region. We need to have it coherent to the EU strategic agenda, but also we need to have this as a tool that can develop the strategic dialogue with the United States in the region, both at national and the entire region level. And from that point of view, what can I say is that at the internal political level, even though there is sometimes a very divergent speech, the Three Seas initiative is a non-contested topic from the point of view because everyone understands the need to have this regional construction and the need to develop the infrastructure. Also, when we speak about Three Seas, we need to have in mind the risks that this initiative is facing. And internal risk assessment made home on what can affect the Three Seas, other than the obvious, let's say, divergent national interests or the fact that we may assist to a leadership competition. One important issue is the fact of funding. If we don't have the necessary financial resources to implement these projects, the Three Seas risk to be only a very nice speech, a very nice meeting platform, but without funding, everything is more or less at the start of initiatives and doesn't get any concretization. Secondly, this question of funding also relates to the question of developing human resources. We have realized that in the region, the brain drain is of utmost importance, and we are losing daily new human resources to other more developed countries. And the Three Seas, with this capacity to put together resources, to bring together at the same time to get unity of EU funding with US funding, can help the region to stabilize this brain drain problem. Because without human resources, we don't have the resources to build the projects that we need that we speak about. Also, from the digital point of view, even though we like to say that we have a very skilled IT labor force, which is true, we don't have the necessarily financial and human resources needed to coagulate at the national level these resources. And the Three Seas may build the platform for the IT cooperation, because in this the IT world, not having the resources and having the critical mass to build global projects can affect the full-time development. And finally, we need to have in mind the bigger pictures. The Three Seas is not an island in itself. It's actually an important region in a world that is dominated by the competition between the US and China, for instance. And from that point of view, the Three Seas must find its own way in order not to be necessarily affected by the fact that competition and how it can disrupt the region. We discussed a lot back home on how the Three Seas is facing for instance, the question of China investments in the region, and each of our countries had their own solution, more or less economical, political ones. So the question, for instance, 5G. We had a debate back home on how can we develop the 5Gs, and how can we secure that 5G is being developed by companies that are from friendly and like-minded countries. And the point of view, Three Seas initiative can create the framework in the region on developing this wider question. Cannot be that cannot have a national answer, but need to have a regional one, because if we do in Bucharest one decision, and for instance in Warsaw or in Prague, they take different decisions, then this may affect the cohesion of the region.
Thank you, Mikhail. And I see that there are some questions coming in from the online audience on China and Ukraine as well, so I will ask them after the last panelist. So coming to you, Anthony, what is the US current position on the Three Seas initiative? It has shifted. We've seen and observed some elements of change when it comes to one administration and current. From US perspective, how should Three Seas initiative evolve? How US perceives from geopolitical, economic perspective the initiative? The floor is yours.
Thank you, my friend Martins, and also thank you to Professor Andris Prus, now chairman of Latvian Institute of International Affairs, for putting together this timely discussion. So concerning US, I hear and I echo what's been talked about. One word, disappointing. I don't know how else I can describe it. Coming from the United States as a citizen, private citizen of the United States, and I'm not representing this discussion from any official capacity. I'm a think tank person. I have my own view, so I'm not associated with the United States government. But as a citizen of the United States, this is pretty disappointing. So, United States has a very big stake in the region, more than ever. I mean, I don't have to talk about this because we all know what's going on. And Three Seas initiatives matters more than ever to the United States. And I want to highlight this point. So Three Seas initiative has been initiated. I think we should focus on how to execute this initiative strategically and effectively, and most practically. If I'm an advisor to President Biden, I would advise him, Mr. President, when you go to G7 meeting this weekend to Germany, when you attend your NATO summit in Spain, talk about Three Seas initiative. Talk about the importance of Three Seas initiative. This is really an effective diplomatic way of helping our allies and partners in the region. I mean, Latvia is one of the great Baltic states. Not coming to Latvia for this important summit at this particular juncture, it's a really missed opportunity. So enough about that, but I want to focus on what we should do and what can be done. Again, the focus should be, what do we do from here? How do we execute this initiative? I mean, you have internal discussions and problems and whatsoever. I mean, I'm not here to solve that problem. I don't have that capacity, but I think we can all focus on how we go from here. So I was counting, so 12 countries in the Three Seas initiative in the United States, a total of 13 countries. So this is the 7th gathering since the establishment of Three Seas initiative. It's kind of midpoint, right? So we have, let's say, 5 more or 6 more, summits, including hopefully one in the United States eventually. This is really an important juncture for us to think strategically what we need to do and how do we really elevate what we have rather than focusing on or talking about problems. Velina talked about Austria. I think Austria here can be a very good facilitator. To me, because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we need to somehow make Three Seas initiative a bit more muscular. So there will be a NATO summit. Austria is not a member of NATO, but I think as a member of the Three Seas initiative, I think Austria can inject a certain facilitating role between, let's say, Three Seas initiative and NATO. I'm not saying we need some kind of econ version of NATO, but Three Seas initiative is really can be something far more muscular version of what we have today. And also I want to highlight Austria has a very developed, advanced banking industry. I think that's where United States and Austria can team up in terms of how we really push things forward. So my bottom line, baseline perspective coming into this discussion is, if this is an investment project, we should be all investment banker. How should we pitch this idea? if you go to New York City, Frankfurt, London, how are you going to pitch this idea to really raise fund and then the actual action plan? So we'll see what kind of statement and announcement they'll make during the forum and summit. But I think regardless of whatever political narratives, I think we do know what needs to be done. We got to make things happen. And how do we make things happen? We need a private sector. We need a private companies. We need a greater involvement from companies, not only in the Europe, but from the United States. I would also say from around the world. Because 3Cs initiative is such a good playground where technology and values can be put together. More than ever, somebody talked about, everybody basically alluded that the challenges from China and Russia, just quoting Velina, Dragon Bear, they are watching what's happening, what kind of reactions, how Washington is playing up here. So coming down to my sort of final points, I really think that this is time for us to think a bit more than usual comfortable box. To me, this is not just a regional initiative. We have to advance this initiative in order to execute once again strategically and effectively. We need to talk about how bilaterally we can advance this. US Latvia, US Austria, US Poland, US Romania. That's all about advancing and amplifying and reinforcing 3Cs initiative. This is not just, forget about these 11 countries. We're going to have a greater relationship with Poland only. That's not the narrative I'm trying to inject. We need a bilateral, regional push to make this initiative strategically and effectively executed. And also, I want to emphasize, we need to see who has money and technology. Let's go beyond the 3Cs initiative. I'm thinking, how about Japan? How about South Korea? How about Taiwan? They are willing. They share the values that these 3Cs initiative countries are representing: democracy, free market, and human rights, more than ever. So why don't we invite them? Why don't we visit them? Why don't we talk about specific projects? I mean, here, you cannot just wait for, okay, some kind of fund will be established, the money will be growing, I'm going to submit my proposal here. No, we got to be a lot more proactive to execute 3Cs initiative more strategically and effectively. So we don't need annual gathering in a way. This can be a constant, ongoing basis kind of discussion. Poland can visit Taiwan, Poland can visit South Korea. Austria can have a discussion with Japan to talk about some kind of banking and in the context of 3Cs initiative project. So although I'm the last person of this discussion, I'm not here to conclude what we need to do. This is only the beginning of many things we can do probably. And I think this is why this book really matters. And also one last point is that this November, United States, Washington, D.C., because it's happening in Washington, D.C., I say Washington, D.C., we'll have another political circus. That's a midterm election. November 8th, midterm election. And right after November 8th will be the beginning of presidential election. So November 8th, I think we'll have a different color in Congress. After November 8th, we'll have a lot more red colors. And we need to educate new members of the US Congress. The best way, probably most practical way, one of the most practical ways of educating them concerning 3Cs initiative will be giving them this copy so that they really know regional perspectives and what United States and Washington has been missing. So let's think about things a bit more strategically. Again, we got to focus on what we can add and multiply. We're here to add and multiply, not divide and subtract. So let me just stop right there. I'm sure we have a lot more questions here.
Yeah, okay. I think that the panel is getting more organic and trying to interrupt and ask questions. That's good. Just follow up to what you said and about the disappointment. I would argue that the center of gravity, even the center of gravity of this initiative, is the U.S. involvement. In each of the chapter, you will find the notion regarding what U.S. can do, and if the element of decreasing of U.S. involvement is happening, then there's this belief within the format, right? Why it's happening? It's because of the U.S. new administration, because dissatisfaction of how the initiative or the represented countries are operating, or any other elements why U.S. is decreasing its presence in the initiative from
They
your...
are being distracted, I think. You know, the administration, the current administration is being distracted by many other competing priorities, basically. I mean, obviously, you know, I'm not here to talk about what happened, but once again, look at what happened with the President Trump. And back then, it was a totally different environment. It was pre-COVID. It was before the war. He had a, you know, willingness to push forward this initiative. So he really pushed it forward. Secretary Pompeo followed up. But I think that with the President Biden, last year he said through his 4 minutes and 30 second something speech, virtual speech, he at least rhetorically, he said the United States will be unfailing partner of the Three Seas Initiative. But I'm afraid that on the current trajectory, United States may end up being a failing partner of the Three Seas Initiative. So the reason is, I think, in my view, to respect their busy agenda. I think they are really being distracted by domestic challenges as well as external challenges coming from, you know, Putin's behavior. And also, this administration is a lot more political than the previous administration. So I think they are losing these strategic engagement opportunities because they're concerned about the midterm election outlook and afterwards. I mean, in the United States, I hate to say this, but there's already a growing fatigue in terms of U.S. engagement overseas. I hate to say what's going on in Ukraine, and inflation. So this time frame we have, you know, soon to be summer, vacation, Congress goes out for recess, and then all of a sudden midterm election. At least for the time being, I think United States will remain very distracted and inactive in terms of this kind of outreach opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. Imants, yes.
Yeah, I wanted to, thanks, Martin, and I wanted to pick up on a point that Anthony made about engaging Japan. And although I was critical about Latvia's, not getting some high-level US representation, in fact, we do have the Japanese Minister of Foreign Affairs attending the summit. We do have the United Kingdom Minister of Foreign Affairs attending the summit. And I think both of these, the presence of both of these ministers will be related to the economic aspect of the summit, which I think is very positive. I was looking through very briefly the attendees of the business forum, and I did notice there were quite a few Japanese people attending. In my research for the article, I noticed that the United Kingdom is interested in the nuclear aspect of, and we had a mention of nuclear power. So there are specific areas of interest which I think can be engaged. So I think we're already looking at, engaging other like-minded democracies outside of the specific region, as well as, the United States. And it's right that the German Minister of Foreign, the German President will be attending these days the summit. France was invited, but of course, yesterday we had the second round of the elections of the National Assemblée Nationale in France, and so the French engagement has not really materialized these days.
And thank you, Imants. I will pick up some online questions, and one, not surprising, is on Ukraine. It's what are the alternative solutions for the grain deficit that the whole world, and especially states in the deep poverty, are facing due to the war in Ukraine? How countries are planning to address this issue? I think it's a very specific one, but going back to the Ukraine for membership, specific status. What's your take on that? What would be your suggestion regarding what should leaders discuss today regarding the Ukraine? I would like to Mihai to respond, as you mentioned in your speech about the Ukraine.
Actually, recently, our president, before coming to Riga, said that Romania is going to support interconnectivity with Ukraine and also with Republic of Moldova and Georgia, and the three Cs can play this crucial role in securing the transportation lanes from Ukraine to other regions of the world. So from that point of view, I don't see any problem. In fact, helping and extending the three Cs to Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia might be beneficial for all. At the end of the day, the three Cs has this advantage of flexibility. It's being an informal political platform, and maybe the fact that we have a bureaucracy may actually help expand it to the three countries. So from that point of view, it's only natural and logical to have the three countries in the three Cs initiative as an antechamber of things to come in the future.
All of the panelists share the same vision. Austria, I think that here are some differences, right?
Austria is very supportive of Ukraine's membership perspective. However, Austria is also cautious in the sense that it does not want to see a membership perspective for Ukraine being detrimental to the interests of the other candidates in Western Balkans. As I said at the beginning, after the Visegrad countries, the second most important region for Austrian economic and geopolitical interests are the Western Balkans and then Eastern Europe. So it will provide, of course, the necessary support. The same goes for the Three Seas initiative. Currently, Austria is also hosting the Central European Defense Cooperation with the Visegrad countries, Slovenia and Croatia, and also once again there is a discussion to because we are talking a lot about invasion, to invite the Ukrainian officials to this dialogue, which is specifically dealing with defense issues and how to, actually implement European Union defense projects. Here, I mean, once again, Austria will be probably a little bit, playing the spoiler effect, in a sense that it's still not very clear about the position, the clear, position when it comes to the members' decisions on the candidate status. But I expect that when it comes specifically to the issue of, let's say, the exports of, for instance, commodities from Ukraine, there has been a very important summit organized by Austria, international summit, and a lot of international or regional organizations meetings in Austria, and the government is currently already preparing a plan how to cope with these issues. So we are already in a mode of preparations for what will happen in the next few months. And now from my personal point of view, because I also wrote an article on specifically that matter, and I was actually pointing to the commodities war launched by Russia against the West already on 24th of February. So in a sense, in fact, the decision makers lost a little bit of time to prepare it, to recognize the issue, and now they are dealing more or less with the effects from this I argue deliberate decision to blockade exports and to create a situation for the decision makers in the West. On the one side, because Russia will seek to link the exports of important commodities to lifting of the sanctions. On the other side, because the pressure coming from the world, specifically from countries that are so dependent on these exports, for Western decision makers to come up with a solution to also, deliver probably some commodities to them in order to, at least in the short term, to deal with the situation. And then, of course, politically, at the level of UN and other international organizations to provide the necessary support. I think that this has been a little bit overlooked at the beginning because of, obviously, of the situation in Ukraine and specifically the military assistance. But now I argue that Austria, together with the other member states, will simply have to come up with a coherent solution on that matter and we should avoid any cleavages in this regard.
Thank you, Velina. Another question on China. Elephant in the room, if I may say so. And I would like to hear more your, Anthony, views on that. How China perceives the initiative. I mean, there have been many articles arguing that Three Seas initiative is kind of a response to the 16+1 or 17+1. From your perspective, how China perceives that as a rivalry or also an opportunity?
At the very beginning, I think Beijing was viewing Three Seas initiative as a potential opportunity for them to kind of, come in eventually. But since the beginning of the Three Seas initiative establishment, we have a COVID, we have this invasion of Ukraine. So the setting is completely different. I don't think there's any chance for China to come in with whatever their technology and money. As you know, they do have money and technology. And I think that's why all the more I think we have to really act on it. Act on it meaning with a like-minded and willing partners. For me, if United States can be strategic and wise enough, this can be, Three Seas initiative can be a very important practical linchpin between transatlantic relationship and trans-Pacific relationship, kind of linking these two. People talk about Indo-Pacific, pivot is to Asia. I don't buy that. I think United States, Washington perspective, it is equally important. Trans-Pacific, transatlantic. How do we connect these two? I think that's most important part. So Three Seas initiative can be that linchpin, and I think that's why I was emphasizing Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. These like-minded, willing partners. They can come in, they can do work with us, and it can be a very practical counter force against Beijing's kind of strategic engagement. But again, given the setting, I think that possibility, practically speaking, although it's existing, I don't think that's going to be realized anytime soon.
Another question: one of the aims of the initiative is to decrease the gap between Central Eastern Europe and Western European countries. Are we successful in this endeavor? What else should be done to contribute to that? Maybe Imants and Camille on this one. Are we successful to decreasing the gap between?
Well, I'm not convinced that the Three Seas initiative, will necessarily contribute to reducing the gap. We've talked about the challenges faced by getting the Three Seas initiative investment fund up and running. Some of the countries are reluctant to commit to that. We're not going to have the appearance of the seed money from the United States these days, the 300 million. They originally talked about a 1 billion commitment to the fund. Well, despite the cross-party support of senators saying that the 300 should be, appearing, it's not going to happen. So I think we have to wait and see. And I think this is in some ways tied into one of our colleagues' comments, who said, "Well, this whole initiative might actually disappear," and perhaps the financial element would be a contributing factor to the Three Seas initiative eventually, becoming a drop in the ocean, or not even a drop in the ocean. So it's a good question, but I don't see personally that although Latvia has committed the 20 million euro. Latvia does not have any projects that have been accepted by the fund, as I mentioned. So the big players out there are the European Union, as has been noted by Austria in particular. And we've got recovery funds coming in post-COVID, which are large sums of money. Latvia is focusing on the transport sector through Rail Baltica, but that itself is gaining challenges, and I don't see that the one project that Latvia has submitted to the 3Cs Initiative Investment Fund relating to Rail Baltica is a particularly successful one, because it relies on the east-west link joining up with the north-south link. And now we see that because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the full-scale war from the 24th of February, that the east-west link is increasingly disappearing, both in the energy and the transport sector. So that's my take.
Camille?
Yes, in Poland and within the region, this idea of catching up with the West, achieving the same level as the West, Western Europe, is one of the guiding lights within politics. And the 3Cs Initiative, at least in its inception, was an idea to have. When we think of Germany, Italy, Switzerland, France, when we think north-south, highways through the Alps. In between the north of the 3Cs Initiative and the south are the Carpathian Mountains, with very bad infrastructure in between them. I personally come from the south of Poland, and we have very bad connections with Slovakia because of the mountains. And so, especially with the projects that Poland has submitted, the rail and the road connections, this has the aspect of achieving Western standards in infrastructure, I guess, in between our countries. If these projects are successful, then I think that would contribute to achieving a more catching up, at least in that transnational infrastructure aspects. But if these projects don't get off the ground at all, then it's hard to say that the 3Cs Initiative will contribute in that aspect.
Thank you, Camille. If I
may
may
I just say something,
Yep.
because I think it's an important detail. Just in the period between 2014 and 2020, the European Union cohesion funds provided 150 billion alone. So we are talking here about millions, whereas we are going to have a new period of new financial frame, whereas it's about billions of funds that need to be actually implemented on the ground by each of these member states. So here I think the most important point would be to synergize, to see, because they go beyond the borders when it comes to rail, when it comes to, well, these corridors, important transport corridors, but also LNG, for instance. Now in the south we have already an LNG terminal in Croatia, but we don't have the transport network, for instance, for the neighboring countries that will probably now be in the need, like the case with Austria. So in a sense, let's be just pragmatic. We have also Global Gateway project. I mean, this ambitious initiative, which in fact was launched because of BRI, because of China's BRI, entails 300 billion euro. 150 billion are dedicated alone to Africa. That would mean north-south connectivity and how to connect with Africa. Another 150 billion are still on the table, and once again, the countries with the 3C initiative could take take some action in how to synergize and propose something relevant for all of them, or let's say majority of them.
fully agree with and subscribe what you said, but I would also argue that that would require specific countries, including Austria, to contribute to the initiative, right? But I think that we are coming.
Absolutely, but Austria sees itself also in this particular situation, in this family of 12 members, as the NATO, NATO contributor to the funds, which also puts it a little bit, in another dimension when it comes to the other members of the 3Cs initiative. So in a sense, once again, it can be a useful mediator or useful bridge builder. Definitely. In order to actually make all these funds not just available, but to get these funds implemented on the ground. A lot of these funds are simply not, being used for the lack of administrative capacities, for the lack of, as we already heard from the Romanian colleague, we have a big issue with brain drain. We have an issue with administrative capacities on the ground. We have an issue with institutions,
how they work, and so on and so forth. So in a sense, a lot of these things are actually self-inflicted.
Okay.
Right?
We are coming to the end, colleagues, and I found this question very interesting. In just 3 words, and by 3 words I mean 3 words, what would be your wish for the next 3 Cs initiative?
Start over there.
Yeah, let's start
So I
vice
have
versa.
more time
Please,
to
Anthony.
think.
With 3 words?
3 words.
Uh-huh. And what's the question?
What's your wish for the 3 Cs?
Wish,
initiative?
okay, yeah.
For the next year.
Programmatic, resilient, and then outcome-driven, not output-driven.
Oh, great. Mihai?
Powerhouse of the EU, main concept. The 3 Cs can become this powerhouse inside the EU. Resilience and better administrative capacity.
Camille?
Cooperation, EU, and infrastructure.
My 3 words are pragmatic, geopolitical, and geoeconomic
Great.
oriented.
And the host of this year's summit?
Geopolitical, of course. Support for Ukraine. That's 3 words, I know. And survival of the 3 Cs initiative.
Well, thank you, colleagues. I would add and conclude with my 3 words. Desire. And I think that some of the countries, I will not name, desire has been declining, but I think that there's still room for improvement and also to be a success story when it comes to the all member states participating and desiring to participate. Ambition, currently set the high ambition, I mean, to be attractive for not only the 12 countries, but also the outside, not only in the region, but also Japan and others that was described. And involvement. I think that all of us could agree that we have to involve and contribute more to be successful in this regard. So thank you, colleagues. Thank you for contributing to this discussion and also to the publication. Once again, I would like to say our appreciation for the supporters. First, the main supporter of this project, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Latvia, and particularly for this public discussion, Polish Embassy in Latvia. So thank you once again, and I hope that this was the launch of the 3 Cs initiative discussion in Latvia and Riga this week. Many more to follow with the business forum and the summit itself. So I think that we contributed and raised awareness of this initiative. Challenges, opportunities. Keep working. This is just the beginning, as some of you have expressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.